A massive chamber floated in space above the planet Nexus Prime, its crystal walls stretching nearly a mile in every direction. Inside, representatives from 12 different alien species sat in a perfect circle, their forms glowing under the soft blue light that filtered through the transparent dome overhead. The Galactic Council had been meeting for 3 days straight, and the topic had not changed once. The humans wanted to join the war. Admiral Kexthul of the Draknari Empire shifted, his massive bulk in his chair, his thick scales scraping against the metal with a sound like grinding stone. He was nearly 8 feet tall and built like a walking tank, with arms that could crush steel and eyes that glowed red in the dim light. When he spoke, his voice rumbled through the translation devices like distant thunder. "This is foolish," he said, his words carrying the weight of 1,000 battles. "The humans have been traveling between stars for less than 200 years. My people have been fighting wars in space since before their species learned to make fire." Around the circle, other representatives nodded their agreement. The Crystalline Collective's ambassador Zelanara chimed in with her voice that sounded like wind through crystal caves. Her body was made entirely of living crystal that shifted between blue and green as she spoke. "Their largest warship carries fewer than 1,000 crew members," she said. "Our smallest destroyer holds 10 times that number. How can such tiny vessels possibly help us, the Void Swarm?" The holographic display in the center of the chamber showed detailed images of human military assets. Nuclear-powered ships that looked like metal boxes with engines attached. Weapons that fired chunks of metal at high speed. Reactors that split atoms to create power. To the assembled aliens, it all looked like children's toys. Counselor Veltar of the Hegemony waved his tentacles in what his species considered polite disagreement. He was a creature that looked like a cross between an octopus and a jellyfish, floating in a tank of purple liquid that kept him alive in the chamber's atmosphere. "Perhaps we should not be so quick to dismiss them," he said, his voice bubbling through his breathing apparatus. "They did manage to reach our space on their own. That shows some level of skill." Admiral Kexthul let out a laugh that shook the chamber walls. "Skill? They use chemical rockets to escape their planet's gravity well. They burn fossil fuels to generate power. They have never even seen a quantum weapon, much less built one. What could they possibly do against an enemy that has destroyed entire solar systems?" The war against the Void Swarm had been raging for over 3,000 years. The Swarm was unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They were part machine, part living creature, and they consumed everything in their path. Planets, stars, entire civilizations disappeared into their biomechanical maws, converted into more ships, more weapons, more creatures to feed their endless hunger in 3 millennia of warfare. The combined fleets of the Galactic Council had managed to slow the Swarm's advance, but never stop it. Billions of lives had been lost. Hundreds of worlds had been evacuated or destroyed. The war had become a grinding battle of survival, with the Council forces always one step behind their adaptive enemy. Ambassador Trixana of the Vorthan Republic stood up, her 6-foot frame crackling with barely controlled energy. Her people were beings of pure electricity who had learned to inhabit specially designed robotic bodies. When she moved, sparks danced across her metallic skin. "The humans arrived at our borders 3 days ago," she said, her voice carrying the static of electrical interference. "One small ship, maybe 500 meters long. The captain asked to speak with our military commanders about joining the war effort." She activated her own display, showing recordings from the human ship's arrival. The vessel was called the UES Defiance, and it looked exactly like what it was: a metal box with weapons bolted to the outside and engines stuck on the back. Compared to the elegant curves and exotic materials of council ships, It was almost embarrassingly primitive. Captain Jake Morrison, Trixana continued. He spent 2 hours explaining their weapons, their ships, their tactical capabilities. Everything they showed us was at least 1,000 years behind our current technology. The recording played Captain Morrison's presentation. He was a typical human, about 6 feet tall, brown hair, wearing a simple blue uniform with metal insignia. He spoke in the straightforward manner that seemed common to his species, without the elaborate courtesies that most alien diplomats used. "We know we're not as advanced as your civilizations," the human captain had said. "Our ships are smaller, our weapons less powerful, but we want to help. We've been monitoring the war through our deep space sensors, and we think we might be able to contribute something useful." The alien representatives in the chamber now watched this recording with expressions that ranged from amusement to pity. The humans' confidence seemed almost childlike in the face of the massive war machine that the Council had built over thousands of years. Director Quintal of the Synthesis spoke next. His species looked like tall, thin humans, but their skin was silver and their eyes were completely black. They were the Council's primary intelligence-gathering organization, and they knew more about the Void Swarm than anyone else. "The humans have been in space for 187 years," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "In that time, they have colonized 14 worlds and built a total of 47 warships. The Council fields over 200,000 vessels. Their entire civilization could fit inside one of our major fleet formations." The numbers were stark. Humanity's total population was just over 12 billion, spread across 15 worlds. The Council represented over 400 species, with a combined population in the trillions. Earth's entire military could not crew even one of the Council's major battleships. "But they did develop interstellar travel on their own," pointed out Counselor Veltar. "And they found us without any help. That suggests they are not completely without merit." Admiral Kextel's laugh was even louder this time. "They stumbled across one of our communication beacons and followed it home like a lost pet. There was no great skill involved, just luck and stubbornness." The debate continued for another hour, but the outcome was never really in doubt. The Council had been fighting the Void Swarm for 3,000 years with the most advanced technology in the galaxy. They had fleets that could destroy planets, weapons that could tear holes in space itself, and warriors who had been bred for combat across dozens of generations. The humans had metal ships and chemical rockets. Finally, the vote was called. 12 species cast their decisions, and the result was exactly what everyone expected. The humans would be granted observer status in the war effort. They could watch from the sidelines, perhaps help with supply runs in the safest sectors, but they would not be allowed anywhere near actual combat. "The motion passes," announced Council President Mordain, his forearms gesturing in the formal manner of his people. "The human delegation will be informed that their offer of military assistance has been declined. They may serve in support roles if they choose, but their forces are not suitable for frontline combat operations." What none of the Council members realized was that Captain Morrison had been recording everything. His ship's sensors had been passively monitoring the entire debate, capturing every word, every gesture, every dismissive laugh. The data was already being transmitted back to Earth through quantum entanglement, communicators technology that humanity had developed independently and never bothered to mention to their new alien contacts. The Council thought they knew everything about human capabilities. They had scanned the human ships, analyzed their weapons, and dismissed their technology as primitive. But they had never asked the right questions, and Captain Morrison had never volunteered the information they had not requested. 3 days later, the Council's message reached Earth. The humans were welcome to participate in the war as observers and support personnel. They were too primitive, too small, and too late to make any real difference in a conflict that had been raging since before their civilization had learned to work metal. The reply from Earth would take another 3 days to reach the Council chambers, but by then it would no longer matter what the aliens thought about human capabilities. The war was about to change in ways that none of them could imagine. The Pentagon's deepest bunker sat 500 feet below ground, protected by layers of steel, concrete, and electromagnetic shielding that could stop everything from nuclear weapons to alien energy beams. Inside the main briefing room, 20 of Earth's most senior military officers sat around a polished black table, watching the recording from Captain Morrison's ship for the 4th time in 3 hours. General Patricia Hayes stood at the head of the table, her gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and her weathered face showing the lines of 30 years in military service. She had fought in 4 different wars before humanity reached the stars, and she understood combat in ways that most people never would. When the alien laughter echoed through the room's speakers, her jaw tightened with controlled anger. "Observer. Status," she said when the recording ended. "They want us to sit in the corner and watch while they lose a war they have been fighting for 3,000 years. Secretary of Defense Robert Kane leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the table surface. He was a thin man with sharp eyes who had spent most of his career managing the political side of warfare. "What exactly are we dealing with here, General? Give me the real assessment, not the diplomatic version." General Hayes activated the wall display, showing detailed analysis that Earth's intelligence services had been gathering for months. "The aliens are impressive in their own way. Their energy weapons are more efficient than anything we can build. Their ships are faster than ours. They can manufacture equipment on a scale that makes our entire industrial base look like a hobby workshop." She highlighted different sections of the data as she spoke. "The Draknari Empire alone has more ships than we have people. The Crystalline Collective can build a battleship in the time it takes us to manufacture a fighter jet. Their combined industrial capacity is literally thousands of times greater than ours." Admiral Lisa Park, the newly appointed head of Space Command, stood up and walked to the display. She was younger than most of the others in the room, having risen through the ranks quickly due to her expertise in space warfare tactics. "But they are losing," she said simply. The room fell silent. Everyone knew it was true, but hearing it stated so bluntly made the reality clear. 3,000 years, Admiral Park continued. "They have been fighting the same enemy for 3,000 years with all their advanced technology and massive fleets, and they are still losing. The Void Swarm controls more territory now than it did a century ago." She brought up her own analysis, showing battle recordings that Earth's deep space monitoring stations had captured over the past year. "We have been watching their engagements through our sensor networks. The pattern is always the same. The aliens mass their fleets, attack with overwhelming firepower, and fight until one side or the other retreats. Then they do it again somewhere else." Colonel Danny Wright, head of Special Operations Command, smiled grimly as he studied the tactical displays. He was a short, stocky man with scars on his hands from training with every weapon system the military used. "They fight like they are conducting a medieval siege. Big armies, lots of weapons, direct confrontation." He highlighted specific sections of the battle recordings. "Look at this engagement near the Rigel system. 800 alien ships attacking a Void Swarm fleet of similar size. Both sides line up, trade fire for 6 hours, then the aliens retreat when they take too many casualties. The swarm repairs, adapts to their tactics, and 6 months later, the same battle happens again with different results." General Hayes nodded. "Provingly, the Void Swarm learns from every engagement. They analyze alien tactics, develop countermeasures, and implement them across their entire force. The aliens respond by building bigger ships with more powerful weapons, but they never change their fundamental approach. Secretary Kane looked troubled. If they have such overwhelming advantages and they are still losing, what makes us think we can do better? Colonel Wright's smile widened. Because we have been preparing for exactly this kind of enemy our entire military history. Every war game, every training exercise, every tactical doctrine we have developed has been based on one simple assumption: the enemy will learn and adapt to whatever we do. He activated his own presentation, showing decades of human military development. We learned to fight adaptive enemies the hard way. Every major conflict taught us that superior technology and numbers mean nothing if your enemy can predict your moves. So we built our entire military philosophy around being unpredictable. The display showed examples from human history: guerrilla tactics, asymmetric warfare, special operations, electronic warfare, and psychological operations. We do not rely on having the biggest guns or the most ships. We rely on hitting the enemy where they do not expect it, when they do not expect it, with methods they have never seen before. Admiral Park brought up tactical analyses of human military exercises. Our ships are smaller and our weapons less powerful, but we have been developing stealth technology that can make our vessels completely invisible to most sensor systems. We have been perfecting hit-and-run tactics. We have been training to fight as small, independent units that can operate without central command. She highlighted specific examples. Operation Ghost Strike, 12 human ships completely destroyed. A simulated enemy fleet of 200 vessels by attacking their supply lines instead of engaging directly. Exercise Dark Hunter, Special Forces teams infiltrated and disabled enemy communication networks, causing their entire battle plan to collapse. Training Scenario Viper, coordinated strikes on enemy weak points achieved total victory with less than 10% of the enemy's firepower. General Hayes watched the faces around the table as understanding began to dawn. The aliens dismiss our kinetic weapons as primitive, but kinetic weapons work differently than energy weapons. The Void Swarm has adapted to defend against particle beams and quantum cannons. They have never faced a chunk of metal moving at significant fractions of light speed. Colonel Wright stood up and walked to the tactical display. They think our fusion reactors are outdated technology, but fusion reactors can run completely silent when we need them to. Their exotic matter engines broadcast energy signatures that can be detected from 3 star systems away. Secretary Kane finally understood. You are saying our primitive technology is actually an advantage. Not primitive, Admiral Park corrected. Different. The Void Swarm has spent 3,000 years learning to fight energy weapons, quantum, shields, and dimensional manipulation technology. They have never encountered an enemy that uses stealth, hit-and-run tactics, and kinetic weapons designed for maximum unpredictability. General Hayes activated the secure communication system. That connected directly to Captain Morrison's ship. The quantum entanglement communicators that Earth had developed allowed instant communication across any distance, technology that the aliens had never seen because humanity had never mentioned it. Captain Morrison, this is command. You are receiving this message in real time despite being 47 light years from Earth. I trust that demonstrates we have capabilities the Council is not aware of. Morrison's voice came through clearly, with no delay despite the vast distance. Yes, ma'am. The aliens never asked about our communication systems, so I saw no reason to volunteer the information. Good. You are authorized to implement protocol. 7. Show them what arriving late to the party really means. Protocol 7 had been developed specifically for this situation. Earth's military planners had studied every aspect of the Galactic War, analyzed the strengths and weaknesses of both sides, and developed a comprehensive strategy for human involvement. But unlike the aliens' massive, straightforward approach, Protocol 7 was designed around misdirection, surprise, and attacking where the enemy least expected it. Understood, General. All human ships are standing by for deployment. We will demonstrate that sometimes the best time to join a fight is when everyone else has forgotten how to win it. The connection ended, and General Hayes looked around the room at her officers. The aliens think we are too primitive to matter in their war. They are about to learn that primitive and effective are not the same thing. Colonel Ripe was studying the latest intelligence reports from the war zone. The Kepler 442 system has been under siege for 6 months. 3 Council fleets are locked in a stalemate with a major void swarm force. Both sides are exhausted, and the battle has settled into the same predictable pattern of frontal assaults and defensive positions. Admiral Park smiled. Perfect. Static engagement where both sides know exactly what to expect from each other. That is exactly the kind of situation where our approach will have maximum impact. Secretary Kane looked concerned. What if this does not work? What if we are wrong? About our capabilities? General Hayes picked up her cap and headed for the door. Then we will have failed in spectacular fashion, and the aliens will be justified in dismissing us. But if we are right, we are about to end a 3,000-year war in a matter of hours. As the meeting broke up and the officers dispersed to their commands, one thought was clear in everyone's mind. The galaxy was about to discover that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their numbers. The Kepler 442 star system had become a graveyard of broken ships and shattered dreams. For 6 long months, 3 massive council fleets had been locked in a grinding battle with the void swarm, and the space around the system's 4th planet was littered with the wreckage of both sides. Twisted metal and biomechanical remains drifted in slow orbits, creating a maze of debris that made navigation dangerous for any ship trying to enter the combat zone. Admiral Kex Thule commanded the defense from his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. The ship was a monument to Drakneri engineering, 2 kilometers long, covered in quantum cannon batteries, and protected by shields that could absorb the energy output of a small star. Around it, 800 council vessels held a defensive perimeter that had not moved in 3 weeks. Every day brought the same routine. The void swarm would attack, the council would repel them, and both sides would retreat to lick their wounds and prepare for the next assault. The enemy they faced was unlike anything in the galaxy's recorded history. The void swarm ships looked like they had been grown rather than built, with organic curves and biomechanical weapons that pulsed with their own heartbeat. They could repair damage by consuming raw materials from space debris. They could adapt their tactics within hours of encountering new weapons. Worst of all, they seemed to learn from every engagement, becoming stronger and smarter with each battle. Status report. Admiral Kex Thule growled from his command chair, his massive claws gripping the armrests hard enough to leave scratches in the metal. Same as yesterday, sir, replied his tactical officer, a younger Draknari, whose scales had not yet darkened with age and experience. The swarm holds positions around the gas giants. They are using the planetary rings for cover and raw materials. Our long-range sensors detect at least 400 bioships, with more being constructed every day. Kex Thule studied the tactical display with growing frustration. The battle had become predictable, almost routine. The swarm would mass their forces and attack the Council defensive line. The Council would respond with concentrated fire from their quantum weapons. Both sides would trade losses until one or the other decided to withdraw. Then they would do it all again the next day. Sir, we have new arrivals, reported the communications officer. 12 vessels, unknown configuration. They are requesting permission to join the defensive perimeter. The display screen showed the approaching ships, and Kex Thule felt his mood darken even further. He recognized the crude design immediately. Human vessels, the same primitive technology that the Council had dismissed just days earlier. The largest ship was barely 600 meters long, a fraction of the size of his own flagship. The humans, he said with obvious distaste. I thought they were assigned to patrol duties in the Outer Rim. Apparently not, sir. The lead vessel is transmitting Council authorization codes. They have been cleared for combat operations. Kex Thule activated his communication system, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had been fighting space battles since before most species had discovered fire. Human vessels, this is Admiral Kex Thule, commanding the defensive fleet. You will take position in Sector 7 and remain there. Do not engage the enemy without direct orders. Captain Morrison's voice came back immediately, calm and professional. Despite the obvious dismissal, understood, Admiral. We will take our assigned positions. The human ships moved to the designated area, a quiet section of space far from the main battle lines where they would be safe from the real fighting. On his tactical display, Kex Thule watched their formation with mild interest. The ships were arranged in a loose pattern that made no sense according to standard Council doctrine. They were too far apart to provide mutual support, too scattered to concentrate their firepower effectively. Primitive tactical thinking, muttered his tactical officer. They have no understanding of proper fleet formations. What Kex Thule did not know was that the human ships had just activated stealth systems that made them completely invisible to every sensor in his fleet. The technology was based on principles that the Council had never explored. Active camouflage that bent light around the ships, heat dampeners that masked engine signatures, and signal scramblers that made their communications undetectable. One moment the human ships were visible on his screens, the next they had simply vanished. Sir, we have lost contact with the human vessels, reported the sensor operator, confusion clear in his voice. All 12 ships have disappeared from our tracking systems. Kex Thule assumed it was a malfunction. Human technology was so primitive that it probably interfered with proper sensors. He dismissed the problem and returned his attention to the main battle, where Void Swarm scouts were beginning to probe his defensive positions. What he did not realize was that Captain Morrison had just implemented Protocol 7, and the real battle was about to begin. Commander Sarah Blake piloted the Use Phantom through the debris field with the skill of someone who had trained for exactly this kind of mission. Her ship was the smallest in the human fleet, designed specifically for stealth reconnaissance and precision strikes. While the alien fleets fought their massive battles with thousands of ships trading fire across millions of miles, she was hunting individual targets with the patience of a sniper. Target acquired, she reported over the encrypted communication network that linked all human vessels. Void Swarm processing ship, approximately 2 kilometers behind their main battle line. It appears to be converting debris into new biomechanical components. The processing ship was exactly the kind of target that the Council fleets had been ignoring for 6 months. It was not a combat vessel, so it posed no immediate threat. It was protected by the main swarm fleet, so attacking it would require fighting through hundreds of enemy ships. By Council doctrine, it was not worth the effort. By human doctrine, it was the most important target in the system. Phantom, you are cleared for attack, came Morrison's voice. All other vessels, implement Coordinated Strike Pattern Alpha. Hit them where they do not expect it. Sarah's ship approached the processing vessel through the debris field, using the wreckage of previous battles as cover. Her weapons were not the exotic energy beams that Council ships used. They were kinetic projectiles, chunks of dense metal accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic rails. The Void Swarm had never encountered weapons like this because no other species in the galaxy used such primitive technology. The first projectile punched through the processing ship's bioarmor like it was paper. The second severed the creature's main neural cluster. The third triggered a cascade failure that tore the entire vessel apart from the inside. Across the system, 11 other human ships were conducting similar attacks. Lieutenant Commander Alex Rodriguez, commanding the UES Wraith, targeted the swarm's communication organisms, biomechanical creatures that coordinated the enemy fleet's movements. Lieutenant Karen Foster, piloting the UES Shadow, attacked the manufacturing nodes where new swarm ships were being grown. Captain Bill Hayes, leading the UES Ghost, struck at the supply lines that kept the enemy fleet operational. Each attack was precisely planned and perfectly executed. The human ships used their stealth systems to approach undetected, struck with weapons the enemy had never seen before, and vanished back into the debris field before the swarm could respond. Bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kex-Thul watched in stunned disbelief as the enemy formation began to collapse. Void swarm ships that had maintained perfect coordination for months suddenly started operating independently. Manufacturing vessels that had been producing new bioships every day went silent. Supply lines that had kept the enemy fleet operational for half a year were cut in a matter of hours. "What is happening?" he demanded, his voice carrying a note of panic that his crew had never heard before. "Unknown, sir," replied his tactical officer, frantically working at his control station. "The swarm ships are showing signs of system failures across their entire fleet. Their coordination protocols appear to be breaking down." The main swarm battle fleet, which had attacked the Council defensive line with clockwork precision every day for months, suddenly found itself fighting alone. Without their support vessels, they could not repair battle damage. Without their communication organisms, they could not coordinate attacks. Without their manufacturing nodes, they could not replace losses. For the first time in 6 months, the Void Swarm formation was vulnerable. Captain Morrison's voice cut through the confusion on all Council frequencies. "All Council vessels, this is Captain Morrison of the human fleet. The enemy support structure has been neutralized. Recommend immediate advance on all fronts." Admiral Kex-Thul stared at his tactical display in amazement. The Void Swarm fleet that had held his forces at bay for half a year was crumbling before his eyes. Ships that had seemed invincible were now retreating in disorder. Enemy formations that had operated with machine-like precision were falling apart. "How did they double quotes," he began, then stopped. It did not matter how the humans had done it. What mattered was that they had accomplished in 4 hours what his massive fleet had failed to achieve in 6 months. "All ships advance," he ordered, his voice carrying new respect for the small human vessels that had just changed the course of the war. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened exactly 18 hours after the victory at Kepler 442. The crystal chamber that normally hosted diplomatic ceremonies and trade negotiations now buzzed with urgent energy as representatives from dozens of species materialized around the circular platform. Holographic forms flickered with nervous light as military commanders, political leaders, and scientific advisors tried to understand what had just happened. For 3,000 years, the war against the Void Swarm had followed predictable patterns. Massive fleets would clash in set-piece battles. Territory would change hands slowly. Victories were measured in decades, not hours. The siege of Kepler 442 had been expected to last at least another year, possibly 2. Instead, it had ended in a single day, and the enemy that had seemed unstoppable was now in full retreat. Captain Morrison stood in the center of the chamber, wearing the same simple blue uniform he had worn during his first appearance before. The Council. The only difference was the respectful silence that greeted him now. Every representative in the chamber had studied the battle recordings from Kepler 442. They had seen their own forces break through enemy lines that had held for 6 months. They had watched Void Swarm ships retreat in confusion and disorder, but none of them understood how it had happened. "Captain Morrison," began Council President Mordain, his 4 arms gesturing in formal greeting. "The Council recognizes the significant contribution of human forces to the victory at Kepler 442. We would like to understand the tactical methods employed by your fleet." Morrison activated his portable display unit, showing a 3-dimensional map of the Kepler 442 system. Unlike the elaborate holographic systems that the aliens used, his device was a simple metal box with a small projector. To the assembled representatives, it looked like something a child might build, but the data it contained was precise and detailed. "The answer is simple," Morrison said, his voice carrying the confidence of someone who had just proven his point beyond any doubt. "We attacked the problem differently than you have been attacking it for 3,000 years. He highlighted different sections of the battle space, showing the positions of human ships during the engagement. "Your fleets focus on destroying enemy combat vessels. Our ships focused on eliminating enemy support infrastructure. While your forces engaged their battle fleet, we removed their ability to fight effectively." Ambassador Zelenara's crystalline form resonated with confusion, but the support vessels were protected by their main fleet. "How did your ships approach them without detection?" Morrison smiled slightly. "Because we used technology that you dismissed as primitive. Our stealth systems are based on principles that your sensors are not designed to detect. Your sophisticated scanning equipment looks for exotic energy signatures and quantum field fluctuations. Our ships produce neither." General Hayes appeared via quantum communication link from Earth, her image crystal clear despite the vast distance. The alien representatives had not known that humans possessed instantaneous communication technology, another capability that had never been mentioned during first contact. "The fundamental problem," General Hayes explained, "is that the Void Swarm has been fighting you for 3 millennia. They know your weapons, your tactics, your ship designs, your battle doctrine. They have evolved specifically to counter everything you do." She brought up tactical analyses that made several alien military commanders shift uncomfortably in their seats. "You fight the same way every time. Massive formations, overwhelming firepower, direct confrontation. The swarm has learned to predict your moves before you make them." Admiral Kex Thul's image joined the conference from his flagship, still stationed in the Kepler 442 system. The massive Draknari looked thoughtful rather than dismissive for the first time since the humans had arrived. "Your ships are so small," he said slowly. "Your weapons appear primitive. How do they achieve such effectiveness against an enemy that has adapted to counter our most advanced technology?" Colonel Wright's voice came through the communication system from Earth's Tactical Command Center. "Size is a disadvantage when you are trying to avoid detection. Our kinetic weapons punch through swarm bio-armor more effectively than your energy beams, because the enemy has never developed defenses against them. Our fusion reactors run silent when we need them to, unlike your exotic matter engines that announce your presence across half a star system." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. For 3,000 years, the Council had been fighting with increasingly sophisticated technology, believing that more advanced weapons and larger ships would eventually overcome their enemy. The humans had achieved better results with equipment that was centuries behind. Council standards. Councillor Veltar's tentacles writhed with agitation. "Are you saying our technology is inferior to yours?" "Not inferior," Morrison replied carefully. "Different. Your technology is impressive and powerful, but it has become predictable. The swarm knows how to fight energy weapons because they have been facing them for millennia. They have never encountered kinetic projectiles fired from stealth platforms." Commander Sarah Blake's voice joined the conversation from her ship in Sevin. The Kepler 442 system. Your ships are designed to win battles through superior firepower. Our ships are designed to end wars through superior strategy. There is a difference. The tactical displays show detailed analysis of human combat methods. Instead of engaging enemy forces directly, human ships had systematically destroyed the infrastructure that kept the swarm operational. Supply lines, communication networks, manufacturing facilities, and repair stations had all been eliminated in coordinated strikes that the enemy had never seen coming. Your approach has been reactive, General Hayes continued. The swarm attacks, you defend. They adapt, you respond. They choose the battlefield, you fight on their terms. We decided to change the rules of engagement entirely. Admiral Park appeared. On the communication link, speaking from the bridge of the USS Liberty. Human military doctrine is built around fighting adaptive enemies. Every training exercise, every war game, every tactical simulation assumes that our opponent will learn from our previous moves and develop countermeasures. She brought up examples from human military history. We learned early that superior technology means nothing if your enemy can predict how you will use it. So we developed tactics based on unpredictability, misdirection, and attacking where the enemy least expects it. The alien representatives studied the human tactical doctrine with growing amazement. While Council forces had focused on building bigger ships with more powerful weapons, humans had developed methods for making their existing capabilities more effective through better application. The Void Swarm made a crucial mistake, Colonel Wright explained. They assumed that because they could adapt to your tactics, they could adapt to any tactics. They never encountered an enemy that could adapt faster than they could. Director Quintal of the Synthesis spoke for the first time during the session. The intelligence value of this engagement extends beyond tactical considerations. Human forces demonstrated capabilities that our analysis had not detected. Stealth technology, instantaneous communication, kinetic weapons with unexpected effectiveness. Morrison nodded. We never concealed our capabilities. We simply answered the questions you asked and did not volunteer information you did not request. When you scanned our ships, you saw fusion reactors and kinetic weapons. You dismissed them as primitive without understanding how we intended to use them. The truth was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. The Council had made assumptions about human capabilities based on surface-level technology scans. They had never asked about tactical doctrine, operational procedures, or strategic planning. They had seen simple weapons and concluded that humans were simple fighters. Ambassador Trixana S. electrical form crackled with realization. You allowed us to underestimate you deliberately. We allowed you to reach your own conclusions, Morrison corrected. Just as we allowed the Void Swarm to focus on your formations while we eliminated their support structure. General Hayes brought up strategic projections for the wider war. The victory at Kepler 442 was not just a tactical success. It was a proof of concept. Human methods can break stalemates that have persisted for decades. Our approach can end this war. The chamber erupted in excited discussion as representatives realized the implications. If human tactics could achieve such dramatic results in a single engagement, what could they accomplish if applied to the entire war effort? Council President Mordain called for order. Captain Morrison, on behalf of the Galactic Council, I formally request that human forces be granted full military partnership in the war effort. Your tactical expertise may be the key to final victory, Morrison smiled. We accept, Mr. President, but understand that partnership means learning new ways of fighting. Your massive fleets and powerful weapons will still be necessary, but they will be used differently than they have been for the past 3,000 years. As the session ended, and representatives began planning the integration of human tactical doctrine with Council military assets, one fact was clear to everyone present. The war that had seemed unwinnable was about to change in fundamental ways. 6 months after the victory at Kepler 442, the war that had consumed the galaxy for 3,000 years was over. The final Void Swarm hive ship died in the darkness of deep space, 47 light-years from the nearest star, cut apart by coordinated strikes from human stealth vessels, while alien heavy cruisers provided covering fire and logistical support. The creature that had once been large enough to swallow moons broke apart into millions of pieces, each fragment burning in the cold vacuum as its biomechanical systems finally shut down forever. The victory celebration on Nexus Prime was unlike anything in galactic history. Representatives from over 400 species gathered in the crystal chambers where the Council had once dismissed humanity as too primitive to matter. Now those same chambers hosted the largest military celebration the galaxy had ever seen, honoring not just the end of the war, but the beginning of a new era of cooperation and strategic thinking. General Patricia Hayes stood before the assembled delegates, wearing the dress uniform of the newly formed Galactic Defense Force. The simple blue and silver design looked plain compared to the elaborate ceremonial garb worn by alien dignitaries, but everyone in the chamber understood the significance of her presence. She was the first human to hold supreme command authority over a galactic military force, and she had earned that position by ending a war that many had believed was unwinnable. "The war is over," she announced, her voice carrying clearly through. The translation systems that converted her words into dozens of different languages and communication methods. But the real work begins now. For 3,000 years, you fought defensively. The Void Swarm attacked, you responded. They adapted, you reacted. They chose the battlefield, you fought on their terms. Around the chamber, holographic displays showed the new integrated fleets that had made final victory possible. Human tactical vessels worked alongside alien heavy cruisers, creating combined formations that were more powerful than either species could achieve alone. Draknari battleships provided overwhelming firepower, while human stealth ships eliminated enemy support structures. Crystalline collective manufacturing vessels produced equipment, using human designs that emphasized efficiency over raw power. Admiral Lisa Park appeared via quantum communication from the bridge of the USS Liberty, now serving as the flagship of the integrated fleet. Her promotion to Supreme Naval Commander had surprised many alien observers, but her results spoke for themselves. Under her leadership, mixed human-alien task forces had achieved victory ratios that would have been impossible under the old doctrine. The key was not superior technology, Admiral Park explained to the assembled representatives. The key was thinking differently about how to use the technology we already had. Human stealth systems combined with alien firepower. Human tactical flexibility combined with alien manufacturing capacity. Human strategic planning combined with alien resources. The results had been spectacular. Once human trainers began working with alien crews, the effectiveness of Council forces increased dramatically. Ships that had been fighting the same battles for decades suddenly began winning decisively. Fleets that had been locked in stalemates broke through enemy lines and pushed deep into swarm territory. Captain Morrison, now promoted to Admiral and serving as humanity's chief military representative to the Galactic Council, addressed the crowd from the central platform. The Void Swarm made one critical error in their calculations. They assumed that because they could adapt to your tactics, they could adapt to any tactics. They spent 3 millennia learning to counter energy weapons, quantum shields, and dimensional manipulation technology. He activated a display showing the final campaign that had ended the war. They never encountered an enemy that could adapt faster than they could. Human doctrine assumes that any tactic used repeatedly will eventually be countered. So we developed methods for constantly changing our approach, for hitting the enemy in ways they had never seen before. The final offensive had been a masterpiece of coordinated strategy, instead of the massive fleet engagements that had characterized the war for millennia. Human-led forces had struck simultaneously at hundreds of targets across swarm space. Supply lines, communication networks, manufacturing facilities, and command structures had all been eliminated in precisely timed attacks that left the enemy unable to coordinate a response. Commander Sarah Blake, now leading the expanded stealth fleet, smiled as she watched former enemies working together in ways that would have been impossible just months earlier. The Void Swarm's greatest strength was their ability to learn and adapt. But adaptation requires time and communication. When we eliminated their ability to share information between different parts of their fleet, they could not develop countermeasures fast enough to keep up with our changing tactics. The technological integration had been remarkable. Human stealth technology was now being incorporated into alien ship designs, creating vessels that combined the best features of both approaches. Alien energy weapons were being modified to fire kinetic projectiles, giving them the unpredictability that human doctrine emphasized. Most importantly, the galaxy was learning to think strategically instead of just tactically. Colonel Danny Wright, now serving as Director of Strategic Planning for the Galactic Defense Force, presented analysis of the war's final phase. Traditional Council doctrine focused on winning individual battles through superior firepower. Human doctrine focused on winning the entire war through superior strategy. The combination of both approaches proved unstoppable. The numbers supported his analysis. In the 6 months since human integration began, Allied forces had achieved more territorial gains than the Council had managed in the previous century. Void Swarm fleets that had seemed invincible were systematically destroyed by tactics they could not predict or counter. Secretary of Defense Robert Kane, now serving as Earth's primary diplomatic representative, stood to address the assembly. When we first arrived at your borders, you told us we were too late to make a difference in your war. You were right about one thing. We were late. But sometimes being late means you arrive with a fresh perspective on old problems. A transformation had gone beyond just military tactics. The entire galactic approach to conflict resolution was changing. Instead of relying purely on technological superiority, the new Galactic Defense Force emphasized intelligence gathering, strategic planning, and adaptive tactics. Human training programs were teaching alien officers to think like their enemies, to predict enemy responses, and to stay one step ahead of adaptive opponents. Admiral Kex Thul of the Draknari Empire stood to speak, his massive form commanding attention throughout the chamber. I dismissed the humans as primitive when they first arrived. I was wrong. Their technology was different, not inferior. Their methods were unexpected, not ineffective. They saw solutions that we had missed because we had been too close to the problem for too long. The integration process had not been without challenges. Many alien commanders had struggled to adapt to human methods that emphasized small unit operations over massive fleet actions. Some species had difficulty understanding tactical flexibility after millennia of rigid doctrine. But the results had convinced even the most skeptical observers. Ambassador Zilanara of the Crystalline Collective resonated with harmonious frequencies that indicated deep respect. The humans taught us that winning a war is not about having the most powerful weapons. It is about using your weapons more effectively than your enemy expects. As the celebration continued, plans were already being made for the future. The Galactic Defense Force would continue to operate under human strategic doctrine, ready to face new threats that might emerge. Human military academies would train officers from dozens of species in adaptive warfare techniques. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned that diversity of thought was just as valuable as diversity of technology. General Hayes concluded the ceremony with words that would be remembered throughout galactic history. "When we first met, you said that humans were late to the war. The truth is, we arrived exactly when we were needed, not to fight your war the way you had been fighting it, but to show you how to end it. The war was over, but humanity's impact on the galaxy was just beginning." They had not joined the galactic community as junior partners or primitive newcomers. They had arrived as teachers of a new kind of warfare, architects of a new kind of peace, and proof that sometimes the most powerful weapon is a different way of thinking. In the years that followed, children across hundreds of worlds would learn about the humans who ended the 3,000-year war in 6 months. They would study the tactics that achieved victory through intelligence rather than firepower. And they would understand that being late to a fight sometimes means arriving at exactly the right moment to win it.